Being a chartered manager means that you are a specialist in that area, and it means you've got all the skills to do the job to the best of its ability.
You are seen as a leader, a true leader who has credentials behind the great work you've already been doing.
It's enhanced my understanding, it's enhanced my skill set, it's improved my mindset.
It makes all the difference.
This session is recorded and will be available on the CMI website and YouTube channel. Join the conversation by using the live chat box for your questions and comments. We'll answer as many as we can during the Q&A.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Inclusive Leadership in Action, Lived Experience and Reasonable Adjustments digital event. My name is Gabrielle, and I am an Events Delivery Coordinator here at CMI. Please don't forget to join the conversation by using the live chat box. Feel free to ask any questions you might have for the speakers, and we'll answer as many as possible during the Q&A session. I will now hand over to Natasha Kalla, Communications and Social Media Lead for the CMI East Midlands and Eastern Board, to begin today's event. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. Really excited to be with you today. I hope everyone has better weather than I do. I'm in Redditch. It's very cloudy. So my name is Natasha Kalla. I am the Communications and Social Media Lead for the CMI's East Midlands and Eastern region. Outside of that, my career has been in retail. I am really excited to chat to you today about reasonable adjustments, particularly from a manager's perspective, how to make them practical, how to make them feel easy to implement, how to sort of break the taboo about reasonable adjustments being really scary, a difficult conversation to have, or something really disruptive. Why are we here today to talk about reasonable adjustments? We know the UK workforce has challenges around keeping disabled people in work and making sure that they are supported and included. We know that managers find this a scary topic. They don't feel confident in having those conversations. They don't necessarily know what reasonable adjustments can be offered. They don't know the difference between reasonable and unreasonable. Life maybe just feels a bit easier to just sort of treat everybody the same. And you know, this is a legal requirement. It's not just good management. It's not just a fantastic way of keeping the workplace inclusive. It is a legal requirement. So I'm really pleased to be joined today. We have Melissa Peacock from Inclusion North, which is a fantastic charity that has been helping people stay in work with learning difficulties and autism for over 20 years. I'm also joined by Amy Kendrick, who is the chair of the CMI East Midlands and Easterns Board. And if you signed up online, you will have seen we were due to be joined by Dawn Flockton, who is a leadership coach from Inclusion North. Unfortunately, train issues, etc., get the better of everybody at some point or other, and today was Dawn's day, so she hasn't been able to join us. We sent her all of our best wishes, and we hope that she can join us for another event soon. If you don't already, please do follow the CMI East Midlands and Eastern LinkedIn page. You don't have to live in the East Midlands and Eastern England to follow it along, but we will be sharing some of Dawn's content and some of her planned presentation on that LinkedIn page over the next couple of weeks. We also post on there lots of updates from the Chartered Management Institute, as well as general content around management, leadership, creating inclusive workplaces, driving positive culture change, etc., etc. So please do follow along on that LinkedIn page, and we will make sure that we get to share Dawn's presentation and content with everybody. So thank you very much, Melissa, for joining us from Inclusion North. I'm going to hand over to you and looking forward to hearing about reasonable adjustments. And then I've got a couple of questions for you.
Yeah. So my name's Melissa, and I am the Finance, Business and Culture Lead at Inclusion North. I've been working at Inclusion North for 10 years now. I have lived experience myself. I have a diagnosis of ADHD and of autism. Reasonable adjustments, Inclusion North has been working with people with lived experience. We have lived experience within our staff team. We have a hub of experts with lived experience, and we have a huge amount of knowledge and experience of being able to support other organisations to make reasonable adjustments work and inclusive workplaces. So that is what we do as an organisation. would you like to ask the questions?
Yeah, I've got a few. Thanks, Melissa. So, I think the first one is what are the common misconceptions that managers have about reasonable adjustments? I think when I speak to people, they can everybody's got a different definition of reasonable adjustments. They all feel differently about having those conversations. Some managers have got experience of those. Some of them have just never had that request before. What are the most common misconceptions that managers have about reasonable adjustments?
I think the biggest misconception is that managers often think reasonable adjustments are enough. So reasonable adjustments comes in a much wider context, and that's to make it work in any team or organisation or as a manager. It has to start with the workplace culture and values. So whether that be in your own team or whether it be the whole organisation, removing barriers, creating that psychological safety and using diverse communication styles, making things really flexible. So making the flexibility the normal behaviour and culture of your organisation, and involving all of your staff in the decision making. The strongest organisations, I believe, don't just make reasonable adjustments when someone asks for them. They build inclusion in all of their work, in how they operate, in how they deliver their work, in how they communicate with their customers, their suppliers, their partners. If you don't have all of those adjustments within and that culture within your organisation, makes it really, really difficult to then look at including people, disabled people in the workplace, making sure it's fair for everyone and making sure those reasonable adjustments work. I think the most practical place to start is thinking about the barriers that prevent people from fully participating and performing, making sure there's really, really good safe spaces for people to speak up, share their ideas, and also their mistakes. So having a culture where if you make a mistake, you learn from them. We encourage challenges, gaining other people's perspectives and listening to people's concerns and worries, not just in people's supervision meetings or in their annual appraisals, throughout everything that you do in an organisation. And thinking about how your team communicate. Have they had input into what works best for them? So things that we do as an organisation, celebrating small wins. So we use Viva Engage. So we regularly encourage people to share positive stories, updates. Our managers update on what's working or what might be new, so that then the staff are kept informed. And I think thinking about if you are remote working, and Inclusion North is 100% remote, and we have people all the way across the North East and Yorkshire and Humber, how do you create those small conversations into the workday that lead to knowing who your team are and who the people in the organisation are? So for instance, we use a WhatsApp group where people can share things that isn't work related. So then you have that better understanding of the people that you're working with. I think some of the other things perhaps to look at is making sure that you have your policies and procedures in really different formats so people can actually use them. So thinking about, often policies are really, really formal. The language is very complex, and having it in a video and somebody reading it out, or having it in easy read or different languages, and thinking about all those values that you have in your organisation that you're creating or have created, and making sure that they run through those policies and highlighting some of those during awareness weeks. So encouraging people to use them and comment on them and be involved in maybe changing them slightly or adding things in that are practical. And often we say a policy, and very often it's a procedure. It's not, it's not in law. Sometimes that's easier to do, to get people involved and say, what are we missing? Where are we missing this in our for instance, our well-being policy or our stress policy or, you know, our working from home policy. So one of the things we do, for instance, is on Mental Health Awareness Day, we would share our well-being policy with the whole team to keep them connected to the policy itself. I think cutting the jargon is possibly one of the biggest. So in all organisations, we use lots of jargon, we use lots of acronyms, and we use language that isn't very inclusive. And often you find if you have a new member of the team, whether they're a disabled person or not, the language and the jargon that comes in a new role is really, really challenging. So trying to cut some of that out and use language that everybody can understand and use. Making flexibility the norm is probably one of my real passions. So that doesn't just mean being flexible if someone's got a dentist appointment, or being a little bit flexible if someone's got a personal appointment. It's treating every single person as an individual and supporting their work-life balance as long as the business needs are met, but making sure that everyone's treated equally. So, for example, I can give examples of working full-time hours over 4 days, or starting earlier or later than other people, and thinking about when is that person able to do their work when they're at the best. So, for instance, I very often start at 7 a.m. because I know that I am more productive first thing in the morning, and after lunch, I get that lag in the afternoon that lots of people experience. So as a workplace, we've made sure people can flexi their hours, and no one's judged for that. So I know it's not possible in every organisation, but there are places where it does work really, really well. Being brave is one of my favourite words. So being brave enough to be flexible and trust. So I can give an example. Someone I know runs every day for their well-being, mental and physical health. But if it's raining, they might take a longer lunch and start earlier or finish later so that they can run on that day. Because they find when they run in an evening after work, it's too much and they've got other home life commitments. So making sure that person can run has been really, really useful, because it's maintained their health and well-being personally and at work. Involve people. So I'd say involve people in creating inclusion in decision making. So have a whole organisational approach. So giving people the opportunity to share their ideas at a strategic level, involving everyone to have a voice and share their ideas about what's important, all the way through an organisational strategic plan. So a really big example, and I love this one, is that when our last CEO was leaving after 8 years, people felt really concerned. They felt unsafe about their role, themselves, the future. So we designed a team meeting around what does a good CEO look like. And then we put people into teams, and they, on a piece of paper, they created their visual CEO. And some of them had tool belts to say which tools people would have. And some people had values written around a heart, and qualities and knowledge and skills that they needed to work with in our organisation. So that formed part of the development of the job pack and the interview questions and the in-person interview, using the values from the very first session. We also did this with our board of directors and our advisory council, and we made sure that everyone in the organisation had that ability to be involved. And at the interviews, people from all parts of the organisation were there, including the staff team, and their feedback from the interviews was used as part of the director's decision making for the successful candidate.
Thank you. That is such a lovely example. I think it is so common when hiring for a new leadership role for somebody to go, I know exactly what that team needs. I know exactly what that department needs. And they just sort of go ahead with that. I think including people and actually asking, what do you want out of your next leader is such a great way to start, and must be nice for the new CEO coming in to sort of know that they've been part of that process as well. I really like what you highlighted about the policy piece and making sure that actually is sort of accessible and also meaningful. I think a lot of times policies can kind of read like they've been written by a lawyer, and it's sort of for the organisation to cover themselves rather than actually to genuinely help people. So I think actually if we all sort of took off that kind of cover ourselves hat and went on with how can I make this genuinely helpful for the person who's reading it, how might these policies land a bit better and be more inclusive? Thank you. So I think one of the things, particularly in the private sector, where the pressure is high and everybody's sort of go, and it's all about numbers, the sort of one of the concerns that managers can have about reasonable adjustments is that it can be really disruptive, or it can be really expensive, or it's going to distract from, all of this pressure to hit certain numbers. Have you got any examples from your experience of small adjustments, low cost adjustments, things that are easy and practical to implement that have made a big difference?
So I think there's lots of things you can do that are low cost and take less time, because obviously managers have multiple responsibilities, multiple things to remember, or things that they need to put into practice. So at Inclusion North, we have How I Work Well one-page profiles, and it's got the person's picture on it, and all staff use one of these to show what their role is, when they work. So it'll say, for instance, I can use mine. Mine will say, I'll have a picture, and it'll say, Finance, Business and Culture Lead. I generally work between the hours of 7 a.m. and 6 p.m. I do not expect anyone to answer emails or correspond with me outside of their working hours. I have lived experience of ADHD and autism. I prefer having a telephone conversation than having a Teams call, and after the telephone conversation, I prefer to have an email with bullet points in it. So it's explaining what's best for me, how to communicate with me. In there, it will say, if I've done something that is wrong or is not the way you wanted, I'd rather you tell me, and then I'll be able to put it right. So it's sharing some of that. It's almost being a little bit vulnerable and showing that you're human. And every single member of the team has it. So when someone new starts, they can see each other's one-page profiles that are around How I Work Well. And
fantastic.
And it creates a bit of a community, and it creates the fact that we all have reasonable adjustments. So I think that is the way I would look at popping in something that's a really low cost adjustment that sort of sits in with that values of inclusion and culture and helps you move forward with those reasonable adjustments for people.
I love that, because that's so easy to implement and really quick and free. But also, whether you've got a disability that you need a reasonable adjustment for or not, that's something that you can just roll out to everybody, and that would have a really positive impact. I'm sure, anyone who's ever done a sort of clarity or disc profiling where you've got your colours and you sort of know, actually, I'm red, I just want quick and then no small talk and just move on, or I'm really blue, I want to have some detail in writing and comb through it. But just those sort of working preferences can be woven in there as well, and then everybody benefits, whether it's a reasonable adjustment for a couple of people in the team or not. Fantastic, thank you. So I think sometimes some places where these things can fall down is in the conversation with the manager. You've got somebody saying, I want XYZ in terms of reasonable adjustments, or I'm having difficulty with this, or I have a medical condition, I have a disability. And we know that we've seen some research recently. There's very few managers who feel really confident in having those conversations. And there's a lot of fear over getting things wrong. And people worry about saying something offensive or saying something wrong, or not really knowing what adjustments are out there, or thinking that this is just an HR conversation. I don't need to touch it because it sits with HR. From your perspective and in your experience, what does good look like from a manager having a conversation about reasonable adjustments? There are lots of managers that are watching this right now thinking, I'm not 100% sure how I'd handle that. What does good look like in that conversation?
So I think just listening to your question, and you're talking about saying something wrong. If we go back to culture and values, if you've got something in your values that talks about being brave enough to make mistakes, not blaming one another when mistakes happen, that, we're all human, and though that's part of it, speaking up and being able to say, I didn't quite understand that, or that didn't feel fair. So putting that culture into the organisation sometimes takes away some of that fear from the managers in being able to have open and honest conversations around reasonable adjustments. But I think more than anything, people often mistake it. Reasonable adjustments must just be that. So they have to be reasonable. They have to be reasonable for the business, and they have to be reasonable for the individual. And that can take quite a lot of thought. So I would say my top tip for this is take time to consider whether it's reasonable. So don't come to a decision really quickly. So if that means you have to go away and think about it, really take time to consider whether that is a reasonable adjustment. And one of the things that's useful to use, and you could use this with all of your teams, including people that aren't disabled people, and then everybody has one, is a reasonable adjustments passport. So you can adapt those to include everyone. So it's not just around disability and conditions, because you might have a member of the team who's off sick only ever once with mental health, because they've had work overload. If you've worked through a reasonable adjustment, and when they're reintroduced into work, then you can then keep that on file and know what things work well for them. So I would say work through a reasonable adjustments passport. If the person's accessing access to work, funding, and they have equipment or coaching or anything, you can document it all in, and then you can keep reviewing that over a period of time. What I would recommend is you get the person to complete it individually, have a look at their answers, use your networks and your HR team to see what's practical and what is a reasonable adjustment. And also think about what does their health condition, disability, or anything else, if they're not a disabled person, mean? What are the barriers for them being able to be at work? And how do they believe that their disability or their condition interacts with the barriers? So I can give you an example. We have a member of the team who really struggles with being able to prioritize, focus on how much work they've got. So what we did was we implemented a whiteboard system. So they have a whiteboard, and it helps them not be overwhelmed with the number of tasks that they have to do. So they have it color coded, and they have it divided up into ad hoc work, future work, regular work, and then they almost rag rate it on the board. So it's very much like using a rag rate system. And that really works for that person. And all it was a whiteboard, and it's enabled them to do their job really well. Another person has some allocated admin time each week because it helps them to stay on top of their emails. So they have a half an hour twice a week where they just block out the time and close down so that they can just focus on that. So I think those are the things, and then just keep reviewing those reasonable adjustments in one-on-one meetings, and then perhaps review that passport every quarter.
Fantastic, thank you. Again, some really practical stuff in there. Right, last question from me, and then I know we have some pre-submitted questions that Amy has got, and there are some really good questions that I can see in the live chat. Again, something that I hear a lot from managers is that they can sort of kind of compare consistency with fairness, and they think that in order to be fair, they have to be consistent for everybody. They have to treat everybody the same, and that if they make adjustments for one person, they'll have to make the same thing for everybody, or they'll have to offer the same thing to everybody. How can managers get that balance right between kind of fairness and tailoring the support to individuals? And what would you say to any managers on the call who are worrying that reasonable adjustments create inconsistency or set a precedent, or will, you know, sort of spark a wave of lots of people wanting the same thing? What would you say to those managers?
So I'd say that those inconsistencies occur when the culture and the values are not consistent. So when we talk about culture and values, we often say organisationally, but you can do that as a team. You don't have to do it across a whole organisation. So if you're a manager that leads one specific team or two specific teams, you can put in your own cultures and values there to enable the consistent approach across your teams. So there has to be a cultural change. So you can do things like think about your code of conduct, think about your wellbeing policy, think about things being people focused alongside complying with HR and other laws. So I've got some co-produced examples for you. So these are some of ours.
Fantastic.
So everyone who works or volunteers with our company is valued equally. No one gets treated better than anyone else. We welcome and include everyone. We are flexible in how we work and do our best to meet people's individual needs. We care about our colleagues and we help and support each other. We make our company a place where everyone can be their true selves all of the time. We trust everyone to take responsibility for themselves and ask for help if they need it. We adapt what we do to find the best ways of doing things to meet everyone's different needs. So that one there really fits that, you know, being fair. Everyone has needs, not just the disabled person. So don't just look at it as people that are disabled. Look at it as the whole of your team. We adapt when we do what we do to find better ways of doing it and meet everyone's needs. But also that's in some of those are in our wellbeing policy and in our code of conduct. But there's always that side that says, well, we're giving lots here, but what happens when things go wrong? So there's always got to be something in there that says something around when these things go wrong, the disciplinary policy or the other policies still come into play. So there's something about being able to identify, well, actually, if people don't meet these values and they don't meet these statements that we've made, what does that mean? So if people aren't taking responsibility for themselves and they're not doing their work and they're not asking for help and they're not identifying what needs to improve, where do we go? So I think it's about being really clear. And I would say involve everyone. So it might be looking at, you know, getting some members of your team together and looking at what works well. What do we do that works really well? How can we make our team more accessible, or the work we do more accessible, or our workplace more accessible? And how could we change it for everyone, not just disabled people, everyone in the team? And take them on that shared decision-making journey, and they, you know, all the way through the planning and the implementation, and share that information in every way you can. So share it in all those different formats. So I would say, again, it all goes back to that culture and the values and being able to use those as the core before you're looking at the inclusion and the reasonable adjustments.
Fantastic, thank you so much. I completely agree. I think management culture has a huge amount to answer for, doesn't it? And I think getting people to sort of pivot from my role as a manager is to make people do stuff into actually my role as a manager is to support people to do the very best job that they can do. It would transform the world if we could get everyone to do that, and that's obviously part of the mission. Fantastic. We have some really good questions on the live chat, but we did have some pre-submitted questions that were sent in ahead of schedule. So if I can hand over to Amy Kendrick, who has got some questions, and it would be great to chat through some of those as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Natasha, and thanks, Melissa. What a fabulous insight into how your organisation runs and how you consider inclusivity and reasonable adjustments every single day for everyone in the organisation, which is great to hear. So yeah, we have had some really good engagement with this topic. So first of all, I think we should take the question from Vicky, if that's okay with you, Melissa, who talks about needing to manage upwards when reasonable adjustments aren't put in place. So you've talked just now about when things go wrong. And she asks, whose responsibility is it to tackle poor standards? And she gives the example of use of a microphone is good practice, or it might have been implemented as a reasonable adjustment for somebody, but then speakers choose not to abide by that. How would you go about tackling that? Maybe without going straight into the disciplinary procedure.
So yeah, I think that's really important. You know, there's something really important about those checks and balances along the way. So I think there's something about organisationally, you would really identify and then evidence the reasonable adjustments and their outcomes. So I think that it's the organisational culture that leads to being everyone's responsibility to challenge and change for all staff. And there's a real problem here where, you know, this is not working for maybe people in the audience, or it's not working for other people that are speaking, or it's not working because customers are there and they can't hear. So if I was working with the individual, what I would do is I would challenge my own statement around if that was a poor standard, or do I need to think creatively and adapt things if they're needed? So I think about, have I included requirements and expectations in a job description? If this is the only thing the person is doing, is there going to be a speaker? And in the person's specification, if we use a microphone as part of the job, I'd be working one-on-one with the person to understand the barriers. So if that was the main part of their role and in their job description, and it was to deliver to large audiences, is it the microphone that's the real issue? Is it the type of microphone? Is it because they're using a handheld and an ear clip-on microphone will be better, or vice versa? Or are they expected to wear an earpiece and they don't like something in their ears? So is there an alternative available to the microphone that's on offer for them? And if it's a regular activity, so that's their only job, or they're doing it for, 5 or 6 times a month, for instance, can an alternative be purchased or provided as a reasonable adjustment? And for most organisations, providing a microphone would be at very low cost. So I would say that it would be a reasonable adjustment. So also, does the person need to practice? So it might be that they've never used a microphone in a previous role, and you hear your own voice a little bit louder, don't you, when you're using a microphone, which when you start to use it, some people find quite strange. Yeah. So how about having some sessions where they can just practice on it? And I think understanding the why. So why is it an issue? So understanding that, there are other people in the room with other needs. They might not all have the same hearing. The people at the back of the room might struggle to hear. and work through that, the whys, why this is an issue, but give really, really clear examples. And do you have feedback from other people you can share? So some of that good and constructive improvements that could be made, and some of the good stuff about the quality of their work. So we know there's an issue with not using the microphone, but let's look at that and let's see the why, but then let's look at all the other good stuff. So there could be something else around, if those are not really barriers, is a co-presenter going to work better? Can we use a co-presenter? Can we use written materials to hand out? Can we use pre-recordings so there's less speaking? So I think it is thinking about those things. And I think identifying people's needs before an event. So people that are coming along to attend, do you ask them if they need any reasonable adjustments? So you might have someone that's hard of hearing right at the back of the room, and the room doesn't have a hearing loop. So if they'd have been asked those questions before they attended, they could be right at the front. So I think there's, and they could have a script. So I think it's about looking at it in a much wider context. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you. That's great. Loads of food for thought there. Yeah, and I hope that answers your question, Vicky. So we've got a question now from Lydia, and we know you've got lots of experience of working with colleagues with lived experience in the workplace, and her question is about how to encourage that lived experience in the workplace and how to manage it sensitively. We know that some organisations maybe won't have enough colleagues or as many colleagues with that kind of lived experience. So yes, how to encourage that and how to manage it.
Yeah. So I think encouraging it is making sure you've got really good links to local disabled-led organisations, asking them those questions. You can come to Inclusion North. We have lots of experience, so we can help you with some of that if you need it along the way. We've got training. We're a disability confident leader. I think championing lived experience in your culture, sharing the fact that you want the workplace to be a inclusive environment for everyone, and that you want people within your organisational team with lived experience, and get really good at sharing it publicly. So make sure you share some of that lived experience publicly. You can look at the Disability Confidence Scheme. It's not very regulated, so it does go on your own, I suppose, values and ethos to make sure you hit those correctly. And it has 3 different levels, so you can start at the very first level of committed and start looking at those questions and working out what you need to change to encourage lived experience in the workplace. I think I've seen lots of really good examples of co-produced independent teams working, developing team agreements together, work processes and practices, and in turn that's led to reduced sickness, independent working, really high performing and resilient teams that include people with long-term health conditions and disabled people. One of the examples is in a small organisation with 6 members of staff, 4 people identify as having a long-term health condition or are disabled people, and that's 66.6% of that team, and the national average is 25%. And that team works really, really effectively. And the cost implications have been really, really minimal. So we did some access to work support and probably about 3 half-day meetings to co-produce some of their own working together agreements, team culture statements and practical processes. So I think there's lots of really reasonable ways that you can do it without having to spend lots of money.
That's great, thank you. And I think that's right. I think sometimes it can feel like a mountain to climb, can't it? Whereas actually you can take some quite simple, quite low cost steps that will help you on that journey. That's brilliant, thank you. And now we've got another pre-submitted question from Andrew. And this is a really interesting one, and well asked by Andrew. So he wants to know a bit more about definitions, so that we understand what we're talking about. So he says the phrase reasonable workplace adjustments is used a lot, as we know, but what do we consider to be reasonable? And I think you have talked about that quite a bit already. And what is the legal definition of reasonable? Is there one, and what is it?
I think it's not defined totally, but a reasonable adjustment is it has to be practical, it has to be achievable, it has to be proportionate. So proportionate means it's not excessively costly or disruptive to a team, an organisation, or the person. And it has to be effective in helping the person to participate equally. An unreasonable adjustment is too costly for the organisation, it's not practical or feasible, it would cause serious disruption to the business or others, and it doesn't effectively solve the disadvantage. So there's no fixed rule, and you have to judge it case by case. So it can be based on things like the size and the resources of an organisation, the cost and the practicality of the adjustment, the effectiveness of the change, and the needs of the individual. So an example is a new member of the team joins your team. The standard headsets you use in an organisation are not noise cancelling. And the person that's joined you is neurodiverse and finds background noise really overwhelming. But they can perform their role really effectively if the noise is reduced. They prefer earbuds rather than over their ear headsets. So what you've got to offer doesn't meet that person's needs. A reasonable adjustment would be to purchase non-cancelling earbuds for the employee, because that's a low cost and practical solution, and it removes the barrier. However, if the person said to you, I want a separate quiet workspace, and there wasn't an alternative space, and it was going to be too costly or too disruptive to find another workspace for this person, that might be considered as unreasonable, because it's not practical and it's not proportionate. And it's not practical or proportionate if they also say that a noise cancelling headphone works. So I think it's looking at what is practical and proportionate. And you can always check in with your HR teams as well, because often HR teams can help you think about what is reasonable. And I think that reasonable also comes from culture and being creative and just trying to be super creative in the way you do things.
Great, thank you. Well, we've got quite a lot of engagement and activity on the chat, which is brilliant, and never wanting to shy away from the difficult questions. There's a few live questions from the audience around the same issue. So I'm going to ask you a question from Nathan Crabtree, which asks, is there a limit to reasonable adjustment and flexibility, or is it fine if the work is being done? And you have touched on that a little already, but this part of the question, how do you or others control it being taken advantage of? And similarly, further down, Cliffordobia 8032 is asking, how do we decipher and probably navigate away from manipulation by some individuals and ensure that we're implementing authentic reasonable adjustment only? So I think that's a really fair question about challenge to the system, and that we might have people in our teams who want to kind of play the game, play the system.
So I think even if you've got a really good culture in your workplace, every now and again things go wrong. And human nature is almost to look at what you can or can't have. And that was one of the reasons that in a role I decided that everyone should have a reasonable adjustments template, And in those one-on-one meetings every month, we're talking about, are your reasonable adjustments working? Have you, has anything changed for you? Do we need to look at things differently? Do we need to implement anything else? And generally you find that because that's in place, people are not pushing those boundaries, because there's checks and balances all along the way. I think when things go wrong, they generally, if you have all your good records and all your your notes and the background information about all the adjustments you've put into place and what's working well and what's not working well, when things go wrong, then you go to HR and say, this is the evidence I have. And sometimes people are just not right for the role. It's very rare. My experience has been, because of the culture we have and the values, even from interview stage, very often people don't want to continue, or they don't meet the criteria that we've set. And that can be, non-disabled people and disabled people. It could be anyone. It could be everyone. And I honestly believe that disabled people do not, in the norm, try to keep taking more reasonable adjustments. They want to be in, they want to be in work. I want to be in work. I want to do my best. And I think I can say that is the general experience that I've had. But I think that keeping really good records, and if you think that, nicely challenging, nicely questioning, what has this just come up? So if someone all of a sudden has something new that they need a reasonable adjustment for. But I think because we do reasonable adjustments as an organisation for everyone, so we have people that are family carers who may stop working in the middle of the day and come back in the evening, or we work in a really different system of values and culture and including everyone, and that's reduced that. It's reduced the sick time, it's reduced the necessary time off for stress, it's reduced, it's increased productivity because people have the things they need to do their job well. So I think it is that, I think that's probably the best answer I can give right now.
Thank you. There's lots of food for thought in that. I'll take another question now from Jennifer E. Anderson, which I think goes beyond disability and affects all employees. So with flexi hours that lots of us now work, particularly since COVID, and remote working, it's easy to fall into the habit of working excessive hours. I think lots of us have been subject to that over the years. So how can you champion and encourage a healthy work-life balance, but also still wanting to give people full flexibility? That's a really tough balance, that, isn't it?
It's really difficult. And one of the things we have, and I suppose this is culturally as well, because it's across the whole organisation, we all work remotely. I'm one of the people that falls into the habit of working too many hours because I hyper focus. So one of the things that we've created is this, almost like we have team check-ins. So this, at lunchtime today, there would have been a wellbeing check-in. People are talking about what they're doing at lunchtime, and some people have, going for not even at lunchtime, even during the work day, going off for a walk around their local park. And they might have took a notebook with them to write some notes down, or they might have gone to, they might be going to a hospital appointment with somebody. And then we always say that when you're doing these things and you're in a workplace, you're still thinking about the work. So often as a manager, you're processing the information and think, people are thinking about creating new ideas, thinking about how to handle situations. So I think making sure that people know they can do that, because I think there's something about health and being able to remotely work. So knowing that if you go for a walk, that isn't time that's not at work. You are at work, your brain's working. And I think that we ask people to be accountable for themselves. So we say you have that flexibility to work, but we wouldn't expect to see you doing lots of, we call it time owed in lieu.
Yeah.
And we've made it really clear that time owed in lieu is when the business needs you to work extra for either because something's got a deadline or there's additional work. So we'd just be monitoring that to see what's happening, because then you can pick that up in one-on-ones. We also talk about it in one-on-ones. We make sure we have those every month, and that there are really clear questions around health, well-being, stress, flexi, so we can identify when those things are happening and see what we can put in place. And on the last bit for that, in one of our policies, in our health and safety policies, people working at computers, we encourage everyone to walk away every hour for 15 minutes and do something differently that's work related. So, that might be that 15 minutes every hour walking around the park and taking a notebook and scribbling some ideas out. So I think that's, I hope that's helpful, Jennifer.
Yeah, thank you. We've had loads of questions, which is brilliant, and lots of engagement on the chat, as I said earlier. And I'm afraid we're just not going to get to them all, but we will try and address them afterwards. I want to be able to hand back to Natasha just to sum up a few kind of final thoughts. So we'll leave it there on the questions, but we will follow up afterwards.
Thank you so much, Amy, and thank you, Melissa. I do want to address something in the chat about captions and accessibility. I'm not shying away from this. Not having captions on here is not ideal, and that is a miss. We have had the team checking in the background while we've been on this event to see how we can add them, if there is any workaround at all that we can do while we are live, and there's not been anything that we can do. So I am really sorry. I'm not shying away from it. It shouldn't have happened like that, and I'm really sorry to anyone who has felt that they've been excluded from this event, because that is, of course, not what we're trying to achieve here. We're trying to make places more inclusive. Some things that we're going to do after the event that I hope can help: we're going to add captions to the video when it goes onto YouTube, and we're going to try and share a transcription with everybody, so that should get sent out in the post-event email. As I said as well, we're also going to be sharing some of this on our LinkedIn page. We're going to see if we can get Dawn's presentation recorded and shared on our LinkedIn page, so we'll be sure to make sure that we can add captions to that as well. So I'm really sorry about that captions issue. I hope everybody has enjoyed the event. There's been a lot that we've covered in the space of an hour, and we've tried really hard to focus on things that everybody can practically implement and kind of take away even this afternoon and go and do. I've been sitting here and thinking, actually, those one pages are so easy. I could be rolling those out with some of my team this afternoon, and actually I think everybody, whether they're reasonably able or not, would find those really helpful. So Melissa, I wanted to say a huge thank you. It's been so helpful hearing from you and all of your experience in this area, particularly as well with the kind of stepping up with the challenges that we had with trying to get Dawn on the call and stepping in. But it's just been fantastic, and thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. For everybody who's joined in on the chat, thank you so much, and thank you for being so kind of lively on the chat and from participating. Sometimes on these events the group chat can be a bit quiet, but it's so nice to hear everybody's questions and thoughts. I know that we didn't get round to all of the questions on there, but like Amy said, we're going to try and do some follow-ups through probably be through LinkedIn. So please just bear with us while we try and do some of that as well. Thank you so much for everybody for joining. You can always follow our regional LinkedIn page and the CMI's national LinkedIn page to find out about more events. And I hope everybody has a great afternoon. Thank you so much.
Don't forget, as a CMI member, you can find the latest management and leadership insights at managers.org.uk. If you're not yet a member, join our community to discover CMI Confidence with on-demand resources, our network of mentors, and industry-leading accreditations.